it through negative, destructive and violent ways and means, imagine if you are able to harness it and mobilize it for productive purposes, for developing the economy, for creating wealth, for creating opportunities for people to get employed, get good jobs and professions. This is what Malaysia, after all, is also all about. We have been, we are one of the most highly developed Muslim countries. We probably have less problem in terms of turbulence and violence and so on. It's principally because most of our young people are better off and they're given opportunity to participate actively in the economy. Unlike in the Arab countries, as I mentioned earlier, 2 out of every 5 are unemployed or employed only in poorly paid jobs. And we therefore need to do more in these areas if we want to provide a game-changing scenario. And a time will come at some point of time later on, I believe, that we can also offer the same concept and get it applied and adopted by other Muslim countries so that their businesses can also be transformed into a kind of a jihad to transform their economy and elevate all Muslims to become more prosperous and therefore much more productive and constructive in terms of their social role.
Tan Sri, you're a well-traveled man. Where else do you see this business jihad concept taking place, whether it's in our neighboring countries or in the Middle East, or is there no such thing happening in the Muslim world?
Well, based on the response I received from when I addressed the University of Oxford University in UK on the subject, it was very, very encouraging. And the response came particularly positively from Muslims, minority Muslim communities living in the West, in Europe, in UK, in America. And I think, therefore, it is important for, first of all, for Malaysian companies, Malaysian corporations, especially the GLCs, to closely look and evaluate this concept, this ideology, so-called, and translate it into real corporate practice within our own corporate organizations first. And after that, of course, Malaysians are already going abroad. We are investing overseas. We are also investing overseas, and it's easier for us, therefore, to apply the same principles and practices in the businesses that we run in other countries.
So basically, you can foresee a time where I can go to Western countries and say, I'm a business jihadist.
Inshallah. Yes. Yes.
Right.
And not be frowned upon.
Yes, hopefully. What's your wish list for this ideology to move forward, to take roots in the Muslim
most
countries?
important, I'm looking forward to the day when young Malaysians, and also not so young, particularly those entrepreneurs and corporate leaders, to really buy into these ideas and really translate them into reality. And also the other important factor is for universities and institutions of higher learning to adopt these principles and really apply it within the context of their academic institutions. Meaning that it has to be taught. A fresh way of looking at business needs to be introduced. A game-changing way of looking at business needs to be introduced, particularly at university levels, at the educational level institution, so that a new generation of young Malaysians will come out not just as extreme capitalists, that cause more problem than provide solutions. And I'm looking forward to that occasion when business jihad can be a reality, changing and transforming all our lives.
So basically, in conclusion, Tan Sri, what are your parting thoughts on business jihad in Malaysia, not just in Malaysia, but regionally as well as on the global arena?
Well, most important is, of course, today the whole world is looking for an alternative. The capitalist system is out of sync with the reality, in fact creating more problems, and I'm convinced that business jihad, translated in practical terms that is actionable at the corporate and business level, can be a solution even to world problems.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri, the business jihadist.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on board. Thank you very much for watching Islamic Finance at the Capital. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Have certain challenges as well. And sukuk must not represent receivables or debts, except in the case of a trading financial entity, which basically where you buy portfolio, standing financial obligation, which means sukuk must not represent receivables or debt unless it is part of the whole package. And the manager of sukuk is not allowed to extend loans to make up the shortfall. Right? Now, I assume all of you understand what sukuk is. I mean, I'll take that as a given. And guarantees to purchase the asset from the real, shall we say, typhoon, tsunami, or the financial crisis, because we had real assets being part of the underlying assets. So that was one of the beauties of Islamic finance. Didn't mean that we were unscathed, because when you have a panic crunch, everybody got hurt, even Islamic finance. Because Islamic finance is not touched at all by the financial crisis, is not incorrect, alright? We were touched because the whole global financial system is contagious. But in a sense, we were not that heartlanded that really got deep into it. But we'll see later on, there are the case studies that we'll be able to bring will show you why some of the issues became relevant. Now, we should remember that, just to recap again, there is a difference between asset-backed and asset-based. Okay? Now, according to the FSB capital regulatory requirement, asset-backed securities, or ABS, asset-backed, not asset-based, are structures that meet the requirement for being an asset-backed structure as assessed by recognized external credit assessment institutions, normally rating bodies. So it must be recognized by such rating bodies to be considered asset-backed. Now, in asset-backed sukuk, I'm sorry I have to read through that and all go together. The sukuk holders will bear any losses due to impairment of the assets. In other words, in asset-backed sukuk, the sukuk holders have the cost of the asset and not the originator. So it's asset-backed. The asset itself is basically linked to the transaction of the sukuk. And that's the asset-backed facility. Now, for asset-based sukuk, there are two types. Firstly, sukuk that utilizes a purchase undertaking from the originator, regarded as a pay-through sukuk, and sukuk that will guarantee the insurer in case of originator default, also termed as a pass-through sukuk. Now, hence, asset-backed sukuk imply that sukuk holders have recourse to either the originator, via the purchase undertaking, or the insurer by the guarantee. That's what asset-based sukuk. In other words, asset-backed sukuk involve full transfer of legal ownership of the underlying asset, while asset-based sukuk involve recourse of the originator or the insurer are not the asset. This is all reminding everybody so we're on the same page. Now, where our input is coming from is this. What are the practical risks? I'm not saying they are unsurmountable, but what are the challenges that we have that we face?
Setting that up outright. So there are restrictions when it comes to what kind of property can be used for securitization and how far it can be used, especially in terms of perfecting the transfer, perfecting the legal transfer. Which is why I think many of you are already familiar and have heard of a study undertaken by ISRA back in 2009, whereby based on, at that point, during the research undertaken by ISRA, on the 5th, by the 5th of September 2009, under the data provided by IFIS, there are 1,191 sukuk issuance that has taken place for the past 10 years before 2009, and out of that, only 11 are asset-backed. You can deduct from that statistic alone that certainly there must be a reason why asset-backed has not been widely used or widely accepted during sukuk securitization process. There must be a reason. Out of more than 1,000, only 11 are asset-backed. The rest are all asset-based.
From the industry, I would like to ask you simply about the current status globally on the sukuk. If you can give us some numbers, some latest news, and also the outlook for this year, which is expected to grow dramatically despite the legal issues you mentioned. Thank you very much.
Actually, number one, I'm kind of surprised that the Sharia courts have allowed the assets to be of 50-year lease on property which is not existing. Okay, the property
Malaysia remains the largest suku market in the world. By miles, by 1,000 miles. Which means that Malaysia will continue to be the most important jurisdiction for suku. Doesn't matter what happens to other jurisdictions. Because 60% of the suku is issued in Malaysia, so Malaysia matters most. And others will probably at most follow the trend. Yeah? Because they are still learning, they are still trying to develop their own infrastructure. Malaysia probably is 10, 20 years ahead from my own experience traveling elsewhere. In terms of legal and regulatory infrastructure for suku, Malaysia is probably 10 to 20 years ahead. So it will remain at the lead front for many years. And as far as this year is concerned, nothing will change. Secondly, since Malaysia is going to be the most important suku market for this year, what matters is the Malaysian economy. How much of that will drive the suku market? At least from what we can see at the beginning of the year, whereby the government has announced that they are going to intensify projects, among others the MRT project, which is very crucial for the government transformation plan and the economic transformation plan. If you speak to bankers around nowadays, they will tell you that the target financing at least at the initial stage is around 30 billion ringgit, which is very, very big. But it's important, which means that it has to take place now or later, but it has to take place because it's very instrumental to the government economic transformation plan. This means that the suku market is very promising for Malaysia, at least for this year. Because the need is there, the demand is there, there is a real project that will be undertaken by the government. A single project alone to drive that suku market will be huge. What more if you take into consideration that the corporate sectors are also going to raise financing and build more projects. So to that extent, I can say the Malaysian outlook will be promising. But at the end of the day, market is driven by sentiment. So
Islamic finance at the capital is on the sidelines of the 34th Islamic Banking and Finance Discussion Series held at the IIUM Institute of Islamic Banking and Finance at Damansara. The topic of today's discussion is legal and beneficial ownership of the underlying assets in sukuk insurance. We have with us today the presenter, Datuk Dr. Nik Nuzrul Tani, Nik Hassan Tani, Chairman and Senior Partner of Zico Law Malaysia. Datuk, can you give a gist of what you've presented during the discussion series just now?
Right. Basically, for Islamic finance, firstly for suku, you need an underlying asset. So what we discussed just now, we highlighted the background of underlying assets under Islamic finance transactions, particularly whether it's asset-based or asset-backed, and also the practical challenges. Because being a practitioner, we wanted to highlight to the audience today that there are practical challenges to having issues of Sharia issues relating to something to underlying assets.
But why does it matter what sort of underlying assets that you have?
Well, when it comes to when everything goes on very well, everything's rosy, then nobody has a problem. But when you have a default, then the issue of whether it is asset-backed or asset-based becomes an issue, because then you need to make sure that you have recourse to the assets, and that is where Islamic finance, in a sense, distinguishes itself compared to conventional finance, because we have an asset underlying in the transaction itself. Whereas conventional may be purely secondary and purely you may even have non-existent assets as part of the transaction. So in finance we have that, and I think that's the beauty of Islamic finance.
When you say asset-backed and asset-based, is it just a Malaysian issue, or is it a global issue, or in what scenario or area you're talking about?
It is a global issue, because Sharia scholars, particularly in Alfi, came out with a pronouncement that Islamic finance transaction for suku must have an underlying asset in it, either asset-backed or asset-based, which means you must have real business underlying the suku itself, because it cannot be just basically suku based on uncollateralized assets, for example. So this, we wanted to highlight, me and the speaker, the fact that there are issues relating to the
asset, and moving forward as an investor, sukuk investor or sukuk LNG or any stakeholder in the industry must ensure that all these things are ticked, as you want to make sure that we do have a comprehensive sukuk transaction, which is in the sense can be realized in a very reasonable.
Let's just take it from the beginning.
Yeah.
Law 101.
Yeah.
What's the difference between legal and beneficial ownership?
Right. Now, when you do a sukuk transaction, there is an option of either you transfer legally or transfer the beneficial ownership only. Now, but in reality, most businesses would not want, as I mentioned in my talk, to basically give away their assets to be sold off to a buyer, because then it's just pure selling. What Islamic transaction does to a sukuk transaction is the fact that you sometimes do not need to transfer the legal ownership per se, you just need to transfer the beneficial interest to the goods. So there doesn't need to be any legal transfer, which is where the asset back is. And with